Recording. All right. Hi, everyone. Again, thank you for coming this evening to Managing Student Group Projects in an Online Environment. My name is Lee Skallerup Bessette, and in my day job, I'm a Learning Design Specialist at the Center for New Designs for Learning and Scholarship, CANDLES, Center for New Design and Learning and Scholarship. Yeah, we rarely ever say it that way. So at CANDLES at Georgetown University. And it's my pleasure to be offering this webinar tonight for those in the Online Learning Collective. So as you saw when you were logging in order to navigate these Zoom webinars, we'd like you to remain muted. It just makes for a better experience for everyone. It's not that we don't want to hear from you. It's just in a lot of cases there's background noise that's going on and it can really interrupt it. So there will be opportunities for questions. If I can hear them, who knows? And if not, please do share your questions in the chat. One of the reasons why John is here, he may have said this, but I couldn't hear it, is that is here to moderate the chat and so that I can focus on the slides. And we'll have lots of opportunities during this for interaction, ideas, brainstorming, and questions. I don't know why I couldn't hear anyone. Anyways, all right. So as we're moving online, this is the plan for tonight's webinar. The first question I'm going to address is why even keep a collaborative assignment. We've moved very rapidly from a face-to-face or even hybrid environment into a fully online environment with lots of other life changes going on. So why would we want to even keep a collaborative assignment in this space? We'll then move on to project adaptation strategies, so how we can think about adapting our projects to these new realities and these new environments. Accountability strategies, so how can we make sure everybody is staying on track. We'll then get into thinking about tools and what we should be considering when it comes to tools. And then I'm going to share a couple of resources. Now, they're books that I'm going to share, but if you look up the authors of a lot of the books, they have a lot of really great tips too that aren't in books, and they're also available. So maybe you can get them that way or through your local bookstore. All right. So the first question, as I said, was why even keep a collaborative assignment in this environment? Because it's hard, right? We're all going through this. We're all struggling. This is why we all came together to join the collective, is because we've all been struggling with this. I'm working with faculty right now on my own campus, going through these very questions and challenges, and it's highly stressful for everyone involved. And so why a collaborative assignment? Why keep this on the syllabus as a requirement if it's just going to be really, really challenging? And what I would argue is that you should be keeping these, specifically because good pedagogy, regardless of modality, involves collaboration and community. We have lots of high impact practices, such as project-based learning, can still be implemented online. It is possible. And in these stressful times, it is really important to keep open the opportunities for students to connect and work together. If anything, I would argue, get rid of some of the voice over PowerPoint, get rid of some of the content, and keep the project-based learning, because it is so important to keep the students connected to one another, engaged, and working together. And project-based learning is really one of the best ways that you can do that, or a collaborative assignment. But so even though plans will necessarily change, the pedagogical impetus behind a collaborative assignment remains the same, regardless of modality. Those same benefits apply. And let's face it, asynchronous online collaborations are a modern reality of today's workplace. Right now, we're all experiencing it. Everyone is in this, to working and trying to navigate this new asynchronous distance workforce. And even before this happened, this was going to be a challenge that our students are going to face. And also, let's face it, it's something that they are already doing for themselves in a lot of cases, just in informal spaces. I don't know if you heard them in the background, but I have my two kids home right now, an 11-year-old and a almost 13-year-old. And my almost 13-year-old collaborates on Minecraft through Discord with kids in Ireland and in the UK. My son plays video games with his friends from neighboring town where we used to live and moved away from. So again, our children, at least the younger generations, and even I would argue a lot of our students are doing this already just in informal spaces. For them, there is very little difference between the online and the quote unquote real world. And so we should be able to harness that to be able to help our students. So having said all that, of course, we're not going to just be able to go on as if nothing has changed. We need to think of strategies in order to adapt our projects for this new reality. And admittedly, change is hard, right? As I keep saying, and I keep iterating this, that these are not ideal circumstances. There will have to be adaptations and perhaps even scaling back of the final deliverables. Maybe we won't accomplish everything that we had originally intended to do in the project. However, if you focus on the learning goals and course outcomes, it becomes easier to reimagine the assignment. What I've been telling people is let go what could have been or should have been or what you wanted it to be, and embrace instead what is possible within the circumstances. And I put this in big and black and off-centered. Give students the agency, choice, and flexibility to adapt and adopt the project according to their shifting and changing situations. Give them the opportunity, give them the ownership, give them the chance to have a say in what they'll be doing the rest of the semester and the rest of this time as we move online. What is it going to look like? How is it going to be? And really the rest of this presentation, if anything else, is thinking about ways that we include and encourage this kind of engagement and interaction with the students. So here are some suggested activities, and I'm going to open up the floor or open up the chat for see if we can brainstorm some other suggested activities. So either asynchronously or synchronously, share the learning goals for the project or course goals with the students and ask them to brainstorm possible project ideas or formats or modifications of it. So for if you have a synchronous session over video, then that might be a really great opportunity to be able to do that and have that kind of discussion, to put them off in breakout rooms, to put them in a Google Doc or some other collaborative online cloud-based software to be able to suggest activities. It could be done on a discussion board in your LMS. Most LMSs have the ability to record short videos as discussion board introductions, so you can even talk to the students asynchronously, record it, tell them what the goals are of the project and what you hope that the students get from the project to help them ground themselves. It's amazing that when you share these things like learning goals with the students, how it helps get them on board. It's agency, it's ownership, and it also really focuses the students in and ourselves on what really is important and what really is essential for what we're trying to accomplish. Another format would, if you have some ideas, that you could poll them. Again, there's lots of different polling software. You can do polls in Zoom if you have access to Zoom. You can even do informal survey in the LMS. Most quizzing features and functions now have survey functions. So you can think, and you can even do a Google form, right? You can set up a Google form and send it to the students with options and suggestions that they can have answer anonymously or have it tied to their email address. Another thing that you could do is have them research digital projects on the same topic to share and pull inspiration from, right? So have a discussion boards question where it's like, okay, here's what we're studying, here's what we're doing. Go and find examples, right? Either high, maybe they're high production examples that National Geographic has pulled together. Maybe they're examples that are happening in the K-12 spaces. But you can have them find examples that they can pull inspiration from. So even if they don't have $1 million budget like they do at National Geographic, they can say, all right, well, what can we take from this to inform our own project and work? These are just some suggestions about how, again, to engage students or get students started on these conversations, because maybe just putting up the learning outcomes isn't the way to really get them engaged, but having them think through these, to talk about them. What are some other ways that you can think, I'll throw it out to the group, what are some other ways that you can think of that will engage students and get them thinking about different project formats and engaging with the learning outcomes for the group project? Feel free to share in the chat. Ooh, everybody's very quiet tonight. It is late. Has been a very long week. I still can't believe it's only Thursday. I asked my husband this morning, haven't the kids been out of school for 2 weeks now? And he's like, no, it hasn't even been a week yet. It's like, oh gosh, it's been a long week. Well, if there aren't any questions, here we go. In face-to-face, I've asked students to do a crosswalk of learning objectives to an assignment. Ooh, what do you mean like a crosswalk of learning objectives? I don't know about that. Asking my students to research modeling of disease spread. Yes. Yes, that's one of the great things about this moment. I mean, it's not great, but always the ability to tie in what we're doing to what's going on in the world right now. I think that that is a really excellent engagement strategy to say, okay, here are our learning outcomes. What can we do with our current situation that we're living through right now, and turn that into a project. So we have learning objectives on the syllabus, on our group norms. We talked about it in class. Are evident to them when we discuss a particular assignment. Yes, if we're already been having these conversations with our students, then it's much easier to move these conversations online and even frame it that way. We still have the same learning outcomes, everyone. We've just changed the modality a little bit. So let's talk about ways that we can still meet these learning objectives. And I meant to, and thank you, Esther, for saying that again, of bringing in the current situation. I meant to put that on here to get students motivated, which you'll see in a second. But so again, thank you for bringing it up, because I think that that's excellent. Also, the students got different ways of communicating the math, short YouTube videos, quick notes. I'd say infographics are a really great way in math. I don't know how you feel about infographics or not, but certainly charts and graphics in order to make this information, again, more accessible, learn how to communicate and translate a lot of the things that we're learning to a more general audience. So like that. Yes, infographic, exactly. So I think that's a fantastic and fabulous idea. Keep them coming in the chat as I even go on, please. This is a resource for all of you. The chat gets saved as well, and so that can be made available after the fact. We can blank out your names if you want, just let us know. But yes, please keep them coming. Again, this is a resource for everyone, and you know, the more ideas we have, the better we all are for this, and the better our students will end up being. So one of the biggest, again, another challenge, and just generally with group work and group assignments and group projects, is accountability. And I would say also motivation. So how are we going to get students motivated? How are we going to get students on board and excited about these? And again, I forgot to say, attach it to what's going on in the world right now. But here's some other ways. And notice how I keep calling it online collaborations or collaborative, I call them collaborations. And one of the things I've been doing project-based and group-based learning for about a decade now in my courses. And there's something about calling it group work, and I understand why, that just ends up being a mental block for the students, because the students have a very specific, or at least did have a very specific view of what group work was. That group work is we each do 2 pages of work, and we each make 2 slides, and we each talk for 2 minutes, and we each all have to do the same thing. And so we don't want to think about fairness in terms of equality, but think about it in terms of equity, right? If we're thinking more along the lines of making it collaborative rather than sort of division of labor, then we can start getting more creative in terms of how students are thinking about it, getting excited about it, because not everybody has to do the same thing. People can choose what their strengths are, what they're interested in, and this is particularly important in this situation where students will have unequal access to the tools and infrastructure necessary. And so a student might not be able to do the video part, or a student might not be able to do filming and get that film in there, or a student might not be able to do the high graphics. But what could that student do given the bandwidth or technology restrictions that they have? What can they do on their phone that can they easily get to their group mates who can do something with it? And so then that becomes a more productive conversation than, well, they can't do 2 slides, so they're not doing their part of the project. So again, think about it as a collaborative assignment, not a group project. And I find that that's really helpful with the students to help them shift their mindset and rethink what their goals are for what they're doing. Scaffolding and milestones are essential, as well as opportunities for feedback and revision, even more so in an online environment. So we want to make sure that we're checking in with the students, that the students are checking in with each other, and that there are lots of opportunities for feedback and revision. That is instructor presence, right? In an online course environment, instruction presence is key. And instructor presence doesn't mean that I'm in a Zoom meeting or I've put up a voice over PowerPoint. It is, how am I in contact with the student, in what ways, and in how often? And so again, these are much more high touch opportunities to have students feel like they're being heard, that they're being seen, than right now in a synchronous Zoom session, right? I'm sure most of you don't feel very heard or seen at this point, especially because my speaker has and my iPod Pros have died. And so these technical things happen. And so how are we reaching out? How are we giving them opportunities to, again, peer review with each other, for you to give feedback to them? And what are those milestones along the way? So the students aren't just like, oh gosh, in 6 weeks, I have to produce X. But it's like, no, you're going to produce X, but along the way, every week, we're going to do a little piece and a little piece and a little piece and a little piece, so that by the time we get 6 weeks from now, we just have to pull it all together. Another really useful and helpful thing to do with students is to have them devise their own memorandum of understanding or job contract, so to speak, with each other. Shared with you, see, typo in my slides, there you go. Shared with you for your approval and signed by all, even if it's an electronic signature where they just put their initials on the bottom. This is a really great way, again, for accountability, but also ownership on the part of the students. And so they have a clear understanding of what's expected of them, of each other, when things are due, and how they're going to work together, right? This is another one in the memorandum of understanding. You know, have them spell out their communication policy, right? Are they going to have a group text? Is it going to be Discord? Is it going to be, I don't know what else the kids are using, FaceTime? Should call my kids in here. What are you using to talk to each other? But again, as long as they're all in agreement and it's something that's convenient for all of them, heck, they can give each other their phone numbers and actually talk on the phone, which is weird, but for students with low bandwidth, that might be necessary, and they might have to all get comfortable with that. So a memorandum of understanding, having the students negotiate the terms, as well as the expectations, how they're going to communicate, how often, and what to do if something goes wrong, right? Someone gets sick, someone loses access, if something happens, right? These are all important things to talk about. Have clear assessment strategies, right? Students often in these new environments, and us too, are very nervous about it. Just make the clear assessment strategies, which should involve a student's self-assessment and reflection. Have students reflect on each other and the work that they've done, as well as themselves, right? This is metacognition. This helps the lessons stick as they go through. They're thinking about their learning, they're thinking about their process, and that's going to make the learning stick even longer. That's really good pedagogical practices. And then finally, celebrate the victories, minimize the setbacks, and emphasize to the students that this is an iterative process, right? This is not going to be perfect. When we have the victories, we celebrate them. When we have the challenges, we try to not necessarily minimize them in the fact that we don't acknowledge them, but minimize them in the sense that it is not the end of the world, right? That we can still get things done. So some of the challenges, as I outlined as I was talking through that last slide: unequal access to technology and infrastructure, people living in different time zones as they go home, generally life getting in the way. But planning really is the key here. And so again, if we can plan ahead, if we can have those memorandums of understanding or terms of service or whatever you want to call it, if MOU sounds a little too formal and businesslike, we can plan and have the students help come up with mitigation strategies, right? Leave this open and let the students help decide how they're going to go about doing this, how they're going to get the work done, and what they're going to do in the case of trouble. So what else? What other challenges do you foresee? What are the other ways that you think that this can go wrong? Because I'm sure we are all very good right now at catastrophizing. I know I am. So what are our catastrophes? What are our challenges to trying to make this group, this collaborative assignment successful? Feel free to, again, share it in the chat. Everybody's frantically reopening the Zoom window to go into the chat. I know I am every time I'm doing a webinar too. Don't worry. All right, well, apparently nobody thinks there's going to be any challenges whatsoever to this, so good on you. That's great. That, you know, there's always going to be one that even if we don't plan for it, it's going to happen. And so just be ready for that, and be prepared to change things up on the fly. I think we're all going to be good at changing things up on the fly by the time this semester's over, whether we like it or not. So now I want to get into some tools, but again, I wanted to be tool agnostic. I know that I'm extraordinarily privileged to work at Georgetown University, where we have access to a wide variety of enterprise solutions that the university pays for, and has in fact stepped up and even enhanced in the face of this. I know that that's not the case everywhere. Before I came to Georgetown, before I even came to Virginia, I worked at Morehead State University in Morehead, Kentucky, which is in Eastern Appalachia. Eastern Kentucky and Appalachia. We were a regional comprehensive institution. We still are. I'm not there anymore. Where, you know, we drew from some of the poorest zip codes in the country as our service area. These were places where students were coming in to do computer science degrees, and they were only just now buying their first computer. These were students or circumstances and even faculty that if you went outside of the city or the town, say, you couldn't even pay for high-speed internet access. It wasn't even that they couldn't afford it, is that it literally did not exist. You couldn't get it. There was only dial-up available. And you know, the first few years I was there, it's changed now, it's evolved, but for the first few years I was there, we were on Edge Network. So, you know, there are still understandably places, and that's a rural example. There are urban examples as well, for sure. But I understand what it is to work at an institution where there is very little infrastructure and support, where it's all DIY, it's all do it yourself. And that's where I started to do project-based learning, was with my students in Eastern Kentucky, and they proved to me how ingenious they were at being able to figure things out and make things work given the limitations. Now, it's not necessarily fair to ask the students to do that given these conditions where they're already being asked to do so much. So I'm trying to strike a balance between tools that are already available to the students and that are readily and easily available versus other limitations that may take place. So hopefully your institution has resources. Hopefully you can go to the OLC, the collective, to ask their wisdom about what they've been using. What I'm giving here is just a basic overview, as well as some central concerns that you should have. I should have reversed this and made the right small and the left big, but my slide making skills are lacking. So our central concerns should be accessibility, privacy and security, usability, and above all, giving the flexibility and choice to students. All right. You know, in a perfect world, we'd always be thinking about this. In a perfect world, you know, we could get all of this stuff in it. We are in imperfect times. So we want to be able to balance these things together, because maybe the most accessible one that everybody can use isn't the most private or secure one. Maybe the most usable one is not the most accessible one either. So we have to balance these concerns, which is why choice is so important in giving students alternatives to be able to either figure out a solution themselves or give them different alternatives to be able to share things. You know, like with the math students, right? What is a tool available to you? Use that to communicate the information to a general audience. So some of the suggested tools that I would have is the good old Google Apps. You know, how we feel about Google and those privacy and them tracking us everywhere. At the end of the day, they still have the gold standard for easy to use, accessible, collaborative apps, right? Students can use it on their phones. They can use it offline, and so they can set it so that they can work on things offline. And when they do have bandwidth or they have data again, they can upload it to the back up to the cloud, and it'll sync back up. There are lots and lots of things they can do, and they can do everything from a collaborative document to slide decks to forms. You know, it really is still the gold standard. No one has yet approached them in terms of usability, accessibility, when it comes to collaborative. Another option for students is WordPress. So they can go to wordpress.com, set up a WordPress installation. They can add all their friends, and they've got a website that they can collaborate on. It's not as real time as Google Apps, so multiple students can work in Google Apps at the same time. You can't necessarily do that in WordPress, but it is a repository and can be a repository for student work in a place where they can go and see. Mobile apps are also really popular. Are there different mobile apps for making video, cloud-based apps for doing infographics? Some of these end up being paid apps. So again, you know, explore the possibilities of mobile apps, because not all of our students will have access to a desktop. And then one of the ones that keeps coming up over and over again right now as I'm working with faculty and hearing stuff online is Discord. Like my kids use it for video games, and it's quite popular, and from what I understand, user-friendly. However, it's also public and not necessarily secure. So, you know, there are balances that need to be considered. So again, this is just a very general introduction. I could spend an hour just listing tools, but I don't think that'd be really beneficial, and it would just be really overwhelming. So does anybody have any other tools that they've used or are thinking of using with their students that they've had success with, that they're interested in exploring? Please share those in the chat. GroupMe, yep, that's a good one. Nearpod, Blackboard, yes. Our LMSs are often also a great place and resource for the students, since everybody has access. They aren't always as accessible though when it comes to low bandwidth. A lot of these are pretty much behemoths when it comes to being a content management system. Hi, Louise. So again, this is another one of those situations where asking the students. So Discord is it's kind of like Zoom. It's a video conferencing app, but specifically geared and optimized towards sharing for video games. So most kids, and I'm going to say kids because I'm an old person now, most kids use it to collaborate and play video games together. But it doesn't have to be, right? It is platform agnostic in that kind of way. And I've heard from some faculty that I was really surprised to hear from, that they've decided that they're going to use Discord because it's easier to use than Zoom. So there's a trade-off beyond that though, because we have to wonder about the privacy and security of what is going on Discord and what is being recorded and all of that. So again, it's a balance, but if all of your students and you feel most comfortable using Discord, you know, that becomes the solution that works best for your class to get what you need to get done. And at this point, we're in triage, so you do what you can and do what you have to do. Here are some resources. Again, these are all books, which you can all get as ebook versions. Hopefully you can borrow them from the library. I haven't done my updated list yet of like who is making all of their books available online for free at the moment until this semester is over. But we have one that's really great called High Impact Practices in Online Education. This can get you a lot of inspiration, particularly around project-based learning, but other high impact practices. Writer Designer, A Guide to Making Multimodal Projects, is really great for the planning part of doing a project. and really helping to set things like a project plan, things like scaffolding. It is actually meant for students to do that, but I find that it's really helpful, a helpful resource as a faculty as well. And then more recently, Small Teaching Online by Flower Darby, based off of James M. Lang's book, Small Teaching. And so she's taken the science of learning and applying it to online. So basically all of the lessons that James Lang puts forward, she adapts them and adopts them from online learning. And they're really about small changes. That is less about project-based learning, obviously, but more as a really fast and accessible resource to help you transition into this online environment. She also has, if you Google any of these authors, particularly Catherine Linder and Flower Darby, oh, and Jennifer Shepard, I'm working with her right now too on something else, that they have written op-eds, adapted and adopted from a lot of the things that they've written in the past to be able to help faculty. And some of them have even been shared. I've seen some of them have even been shared in the collective, the OLC, on the Facebook page. So my takeaway message in all of this at the end of the day is to trust and empower students. You know, they are going through a lot right now. We don't want to put more on them, but at the same time, we want to make sure that they do have agency and that they feel like they have some sort of control over something in their lives right now. These stories that I'm hearing about students being overwhelmed is that they're not being asked, they're being told. And it's just another thing that they're being told to do rather than something that they're being asked about. So include them in your conversations, trust them, trust what they say in these times, and empower them to make the decisions to help meet the learning goals and the learning outcomes. And you'll be really pleasantly surprised by what you find. So I'll open it up for any questions that people have now. I'd like to thank you all for coming. I think this is the first one, the first webinar. If not, then whatever number it is the first one. I'm glad I get to do the inaugural one. I've been doing webinars all week for my faculty, and it's really nice to be able to do one for the community as well. I really believe in paying forward that I'm fortunate to have the job that I do at the place that I do, and to be able to give back to the community and help the community out who might not have access to those resources. So here is, John, if you could share it in the chat as well, because people can't click on their screen to get those links. We do now have an online learning collective website where we're going to be collecting all of this information and all of these resources. There is also a YouTube channel where a recording of this is going to go up once we get rid of the embarrassing part of the beginning where I couldn't hear anything. Or leave it, whatever, so we can model how we deal with technical issues. That's up to you. I don't really mind one way or the other. If you're looking for me, my name on Twitter is Ready Writing. You can find me there. It's also not hard to find Lee Skallerup Bessette. I'm the only one. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have right now, or any questions that come up after the fact. I will also make a copy of these slides available. Here, I'll write my Twitter handle right now. There you go, as I'm talking. See, multitasking, I can do it. So it's at Ready Writing. There you are. So twitter.com/Ready Writing without the at there. Now I've lost my train of thought. See, I really can't do two things at once. Oh, suggestions for K-8 educators. No worries. So what I would say is, again, for K-8 educators, I've got two in that system right now, is to keep it simple and keep it fun. Really up the agency for the students in that sort of sense. I can think of my son in particular. He's 11 years old and he doesn't want to do anything except play video games right now. But if you told him to do a group project with his best buddies on something that he gets super jazzed about, he'd actually do it, right? He's not interested in doing worksheets. He's not interested in doing, you know, what he considers busy work, and he considers just about everything busy work. But if you told him that it's like, you know what, guys, go in there. They love Google Slides. Like, go in there, find images, and do research on I mean, it's not going to be Pokemon, but he would do it on Pokemon, on dinosaurs or natural disasters, or, you know, give them, again, give them the learning outcomes, give them the parameters, right? We want to research X. What are you interested in researching when it comes to X? And of course, that's going to get harder and harder the younger and younger they are, right? And so there'll be a lot more modeling of what you want them to do. There's going to be a lot more help from parents. But again, the older they get, the more agency they want, and the more excited they get, the more jaded they get about the work, but the more excited they get when you ask them what they want to work on and how they want to work on it. So that would be my advice, although that is not my specialty. I'm more focused in on higher education. I'm just making an observation as a parent and an educator watching my own kids maneuver their way through this right now. So I'll put that caveat in there big time. Any other questions? Well, you're welcome. Again, it was my pleasure. Sorry, I'm sure maybe everybody else could hear everybody else's voice, but I couldn't hear anyone's voice. You know,
I have a question.
If there aren't any more questions, you
Yes.
know, I will wish you all a good night. And John will let everyone know on the Facebook page when this is available. I'll be sharing it on Twitter. And again, as I said, I will also make available a copy of these slides in a PDF format for you to examine as well. Luis, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank
you very much for your ideas. Those are encouraging us to do a better work. Just have a quick question. What would you suggest for large groups?
This is what happens when there are technical difficulties. And
that some guy has a
my
problem
computer does this every once in a while where it just stops talking to
400 students. Did you got it?
Maybe if I do this, hold on. I'm on a TV, so maybe if I turn up the volume.
Louise, she's unable to hear you. Can you type it?
Yes, I'm going to type it.
Oh, about large groups with 100 students? Ah. All right, so large group with 100 students. This is where a lot of planning on your part, on the instructor's part has to take place. It's not impossible, but it becomes where students are going to be negotiating with each other, right? Depending on how you want that group to look. Are we talking about 100 students doing a group project all together? Are we talking about smaller groups within that? So 20 groups of, say, 5 students, is that the math? 25 groups of 4. You know, so it depends on what the outcome are for those kinds of things. And there's ways to do it where students can sign up on spreadsheets. One of the ways to kind of think about it right now is think about what students are going home to what time zones, and they may want to choose their groups based on what time zone they're in so that it's easier for them to work together. And so spreadsheets can be your friend, sign-up sheets can be your friend, even doing surveys. So filling out a simple Google form and saying, what are you interested in? What are your strengths? What have you done so far? And what time zone are you in? Or even when are you available to work? Because people are going home to much different situations. And so maybe there are students who can only work in the mornings because that's when they can get on the computer. And maybe there are students who can only work at night because that's when they're off of work. And so finding ways to facilitate that community with the students, even if they weren't doing group projects, I've been encouraging faculty to do that. Have students, you know, connect students who are in the same time zone with one another so that they can facilitate and form community and not feel so disconnected from the system, from each other. So John's going to add something. Yeah, there's a lot of asynchronous planning that ends up going on.
Yeah, so what are you looking to do with 100 students? Luis, can you hear me?
Still nothing.
Am I muted too?
Yes, I didn't hear you, John.
You can hear me now. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so what are you looking to do with 100 students?
No, I was just reading in the Facebook group that some guy has a problem or 400 students. I cannot imagine handling 400 students online. That is a real complex problem, because usually when you handle those large classes, you have a lot of TAs, right?
Yeah, of course, of course.
But imagine online, you need to coordinate the TAs and you need to work with the students. So I'm just writing him that I don't see an easy solution on that.
I think it really depends on the flexibility of the program, in which if they're able to literally break out the classes. For instance, if there are TAs by different like Zoom sessions, right? And so like, for instance, I teach a class of 80 that I taught today, and I taught it on Zoom. And it's about the pedagogical structure of it. So, we did a warm-up activity and had a group discussion. I broke them all out into pre-assigned groups, and then I went amongst all the groups. I went through the 10 groups of 8. And then I closed the breakout rooms. It came back as a class. I have like more class discussion, but I can't imagine like more than 400 tenable, but even more than that. You would have to buy an extra license for Zoom because the original for the Pro starts at 100, right? And so I'm able to 100.
Yeah, so, even if there is a virtual limit for the number of connections. Yes, in my classes now, the attendance rate is about 60%.
Wow.
So, yes, so and even though I told them, if you don't show up at the sync session, you will get some points discounted from your final grade.
Sure.
They are in a vacation mode, but yes, this guy is teaching physics, so it's something really, really, really complex, because the natural solutions are not coming easily for that.
Sure. Yeah, we had a discussion in my class today. I'm teacher education, and we had math educators talking about the challenges this would pose, because like physics and chemistry, they're application and analysis-based areas, right? Which, if you don't have the foundational requisite skills with you already, like math, it becomes challenging to do next steps and next parts. And so, I mean, for that situation, I would hope they'd be able to, if they do have TAs, break it down, right? And have smaller sessions amongst the TAs on Zoom. And I would probably not have the class back together if you're allowed to, right? In terms of what you have access to. But 400, I don't know, because I teach at a small institution. And so for 80 is huge. Right?
Yeah, I do at 10.
800.
Yeah, I do at 10. So for me, it's easily to go online, because so I tell them that we are exercising the professional life, where you don't have meetings face-to-face every day. Yep. So you do a lot online. So they are happy, but no, I cannot imagine the scenario for this guy. It's really, really complex. But thank you very much for your point of views. I'm really happy to share the experience and to hear you guys.
Great.
And I can finally hear you, because I found a speaker that worked somehow in my input. So there we go. Now I'm here. Hi, John.
Hey, Lee.
Face-to-face is still important.
It is. I'm an experientialist. I mean, but I will say, in my Zoom classes today, I had 2 classes back to back, and I don't enjoy that schedule anymore. 1, because it's exhausting, but 2, they had the most rich. They had the most rich discussions, and they had a much better sense of accountability to report back to the class than they have when they're in an auditorium with me. And so, like, I really found it refreshing that they're able to have the space by which they took ownership of the work, and they were empowered in a way. And part of it was like, we're going to make mistakes, and I totally made a big mistake. I totally put them into groups and gave them all Google Docs to work within in their groups. So, they're 10 groups, and I forgot to open the drive for them. So I'm getting all these pings and emails for requests, right? And at that point, I was luckily, for those of you who do breakout groups or breakout rooms, there is a little broadcast announcement to all the rooms at once. So I was like, oh my God, stop emailing me. I'll open the drive. right? But the first thing, you know, it's just telling them we're going to make lots of mistakes, and I'm as stressed as you are, and I am unsure you are, but I know my content, and we're going to be okay. And so we're just going to play with this, and it's just where we are now. Yeah. I mean, we're close to the rest of the semester and probably going online now for summer school too. And it's kind of like, this is just the way it's going to be. So let's just kind of get used to it together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and again, in this case, I've been doing webinars all week this week, and I've been able to hear everyone using the exact same setup as I have right now. And tonight it crapped out, you know. And you know, that's one of the reasons why the co-facilitators are really useful in these environments, so that you have somebody as a kind of a backup or helping out if technical things go wrong. Not everybody has that luxury, but that's also a really important component. And yeah, I mean, it's like I said, like, you know, if you want to leave it in, you know, the snafus, the mistakes, you know, because we all make them, even though I've been doing this now for, you know, a week and a half constantly. I thought I had it down. I'm like, I'm fine. I've been doing this all week. You know, now my AirPods decided to crap out. So there you go.
Nobody's fine.
Yeah.
Lee, do you have an answer for Jessica's question about flipped learning?
About flipped learning?
Yeah.
Well, I think that one of the concepts of like, so flipped learning is kind of a strange concept to think of when we're thinking of it in an online environment, because the idea is like they would watch videos at home and then get together in class. And so I think the collaborative aspects of it, the asynchronous nature of it, right, of flipped learning, where they watch or consume at their own pace, and then coming together to make sense of it at the same time, rather than consuming it and then making sense of it on their own. I think that that's something that we can take from flipped learning, is just the idea of when is the synthesis, when is the consumption, and then when is the synthesis. And I know that's the wrong term, and I'm sure I'm giving John like the heebie-jeebies right now with me using my really poor terms, but like
replication.
yeah, but that's it, right? So like that's the kind of notion of flipped classroom that I think you can embrace for this, is that, okay, yeah, they're off doing things on their own, but when it comes to the moment of synthesis and application, they're doing that together, right?
So for me, I teach flip blended through Canvas. So outside of class, you know, they work on their knowledge and comprehension. And in their activities, they're building a foundation of knowledge for what we're working with. I do teacher ed, and so I do intro to teaching and learning and classroom management and social methods and research methods. So they're learning the basics outside of class. And they may have small assessments or drafted activities to confirm that before they come to class, because they know when they come to class, my job is more to clarify, not summarize for them. And so when we reintroduce stuff in the beginning of class, it's really the space by when they're put out, at least now on Zoom, as opposed to in their physical groups in class. They're put into those groups, either to apply those concepts. Like today, they were looking at different management theories, and they had a brilliant idea, because now they're on Zoom. My students in my management class are teaching for the next three weeks, so they have to learn Zoom. We're going to proceed like we would in the past, but the lesson has to be application-based, at least, using the theories. So they did the basic, they read the chapter, they made a quiz, we all took the quiz, they came to class, and part of it in terms of their groups was each group had a leader who were teaching the lesson in it. They applied it by looking at how this theorist would make sense of going online, and what would the rules be for being online educators and online students. So they literally learned use the situation we're in to apply the theory and then analyze it and create their own rules, which is the synthesis. And then out of the class, we evaluate it in terms of what we think about it, the pros and cons. But you can still have that space, at least within Zoom and breakouts, for which they're working on really applying and go through the theories. In my classes specifically, I always make sure they draft something. They always turn in something before. That's kind of like a check. It could be a short quiz we do. It could be a little application activity. But within those spaces, they have to be, it's the grind, right? So they're gonna be in there doing stuff, and it's getting messy, but we'll make sense of what it makes sense to apply this, to analyze this, to evaluate, and to create with it. Because I use balloons as structure for everything that I do. But I think there's a great space for it.
Yeah. So I want to address, so Karen said 600 elementary students in content art classes. It's an interesting problem. And I think something like that though is that we start getting onto scale of thinking about these projects less as projects, but more like crowdsourcing opportunities. So what do we want 600 students in content art classes to come together and do, not necessarily collaboratively, but together, right? And so that they're contributing and building something larger than themselves, right? Something that lives on, something that other people will look at and watch, something that is not just, I did it, I'm going to show it, hold it up to the camera, and then it'll never be seen again, right? It's the difference between kind of a disposable assignment and a durable assignment. And even kids get that, right? Kids get super jazzed for being a part of something bigger than themselves. And this is an opportunity to have students young students be a part of something bigger than they are, right? And so think about it in terms of what do we all want to accomplish together? We have the learning outcomes, right, that we want every individual to accomplish. But then can we look at a bigger picture and say, what do we all want to accomplish together? Right? What can we do that is meaningful, that we can make meaning from this moment together? And as 600 possible strangers, what can we do with the kids who know each other, and then those pockets of kids coming all together to do something district-wide, right? Like, how can we think differently about this when we're thinking about each other in isolation, but also the various ways that we can collaborate, not just, you know, face-to-face and synchronously, but working together, crowdsourcing towards something bigger than ourselves. Online workshop activities.
What kind?
Yeah, what kind?
Okay, so hi. I teach in a child and youth work program. Mm-hmm. And so part and parcel of the students' training is to be able to facilitate therapeutic groups. And so this particular course is a human sexuality course, but this is a major group project where students are expected to essentially conduct research around a particular area. So let's say it could be STIs or whatever else it might be. And then they are given a particular youth demographic. So it could be, let's say, 12 to 14-year-olds in an after-school program, or 16 to 18-year-olds in a group home. And so they are expected to run full-on workshops. And the rest of the class become 12 to 14-year-olds, so to speak, or 16 to 18-year-olds. And the idea is to basically assess their skills in terms of designing workshops and effectively actually running workshops as well. So everything from whether it's age appropriate, whether it's inclusive, all of those kinds of things. We've completed 50% of the in-class pieces, and it went very, very well. So now I'm thinking moving online using Blackboard's collaborative ultra thing, whatever it's called, Collaborate, how that can be done. I'm thinking maybe some videos that they could produce and upload it, but also running it as a synchronous kind of in virtual class workshop activity. And I know some of my students are, although they're excited, they are also really, really stressed because how the hell do you facilitate an online workshop? Yeah. To make it work for them, I don't have an issue because there's even AA groups that are moving online, right? So this is actually a really cutting edge, beautiful moment to think through a radically changing world. How do we continue child and youth work in virtual spaces as well? So to motivate them on that level, I don't have an issue with. It's more about finding resources and ideas for them to bring it to an online platform. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does make sense. And this might be a situation where how the assignment gets weighted has to be shifted, right? This is the kind of
Yes.
compromise that, you know, they do have to do the planning, and they have to show. So it's almost like they have to tell much more than they'll have the opportunity to show. And so it becomes, the deliverable is about telling what they would do rather than showing that they could do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and it's again, it's not ideal, right? Ideally, like you said, you want the role play and all of that kind of stuff. But, you know, it might be that a lot of it is talking through and or writing through what they would do, and maybe giving them scenarios. So like they have their workshop prepared, and they submit it, and then people come with responses and say, what would you do if I were a 16-year-old and asked this question or behaved in this way? Or, and again, this isn't my area, so I don't know how that role play would work, but certainly then it becomes not so much that I'm going to actually do the thing, but I'm going to explain how I would do the thing. And it's not ideal, but it might be like the kind of compromise that we have to come up with in this kind of situation.
Right, I understand. I mean, I've already reworked the rubric in terms of weighting kind of the creative online resources a lot more than things like body language and whatever, right? Yeah.
All of a sudden, you become very aware of. I've become very aware of how much I touch my face from all of these Zoom meetings.
Do not touch your face.
Poor behavior right now. This is not COVID-19 approved.
Right.
What I do. And of course, the more I see it, the more I want to touch my face. So it's just, you know.
I get it.
And I think, you know, at a certain point as well, like I said, ask your students, right? Ask your students. They're really excited. They're motivated. But, you know, you tell them.
I've sent out a survey. I have sent out a survey where I did ask the input, and the input was more in the form of questions, which we're excited about this. We just have never done anything like this. So if there's any resources that you can point us to in terms of online facilitation, we'd be happy to, as opposed to we'll do it like this.
I would just throw in one thing, and I don't have an answer per se, is what you're allowed to do per potentially a specific accreditation for what is okay to pass certain standards for assessment for this. And that's the only thing I think of, because I'm about to go through accreditation next week, and we're doing a Zoom accreditation visit.
Ouch.
And so just, you know, and so one of the things for all of our institutions right now is making sense per our regional accreditations, what our universities are doing, then introducing online for that data for when we're re-accredited by the middle states or SACs or whomever. So, you know, I think it's a case also, what am I allowed to do?
Yeah. For I think the biggest thing for me is just that the kinds of expected outcomes for this particular project needs to be changed for half of the class, because the first half have already completed that, right? And so that had to do with the doing piece, and now weighting the explanation piece a little bit more, and just figuring out how much of that will make sense as well. Because what I also don't want is students just reading off a page saying we will do this and this and this and this. I'd like to use this moment in a similar way that this group was created, right? That what would online counseling or online supportive group activities look like? And I mean, not to put too much pressure on them, but to also have faith in them to be able to pave the way, right, in terms of what this would look like.
I personally never used Collaborate, because we use Canvas. But for something like this, to whatever degree I could, and it could be labor intensive, I would probably do a simulation with a student over Zoom and record it. And so then I would be the one giving them the feedback or the next scenario or the like, or posting it for them to read and then process for it. Or, you know, they could do it on their own and literally have a discussion by themselves within Zoom or terms of capturing it. But if you had, per whatever your protocol was for, you know, action and reaction to stuff, then it'd be interesting to have someone on the other end on a Zoom call that they're able to interact, right? And to whatever degree that is acceptable for assessment would be interesting. Yeah. But I mean, it's right. We're in a space where, like, let's figure out new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I'm less stressed, but it's just making sure that the tools are there for students to create magic with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and I think that if you bring that energy in with them, that energy of curiosity, that energy of discovery, like you said, that you're excited, they're excited, and you know, it's okay that none of us know, and we are literally in uncharted territory. This is unheard of that something like this has ever happened before. You know, and it's terrifying to be a part of this grand social and educational experience, but on the macro scale, but on the micro scale, you know, I think you have the right attitude to see this as a potential opportunity. And if you bring that energy and you bring that honesty into your students, I think that, you know, that yeah, you don't have all the answers to all the questions, and let's find out together, right? Let's figure this out together. Yeah. You're still muted, John. Oh, still muted.
Yeah, still muted, John.
Still muted, John.
Now, am I not muted?
Now you're not muted.
Well, I mean, this is it's a moment, right? In which, you know, some people, I encourage people to consider change, right? And, you know, I'm not, fun fact, I'm not an online educator, right? But I know that regardless, we're going online. You know, so we have to figure out where we are in this moment. And I don't want everyone to become online educators and everything to go online, but at best we may become more hybrid and blended educators in reversible. But I think it's a choice, right? You know, because I say on our walls and our posts, like, this is a chance to improve higher education. And you don't have to. You can go back to doing what you've been doing for 10 years, right? But this is a space where we can get creative because we have not had time to do this in forever. And some of us, myself included, have been using the same, like, PowerPoint for years, right? Who have to reconceptualize how I do stuff, and I'm learning so much, right? And that's kind of the cool part about it. I still got to teach at 8 o'clock in the morning, but like there's really interesting ways I could do it differently. And this morning I did it differently for the first time in a very long time. And that was great. It was empowering for me.
Yeah. And I think, so we have a question about the long-term impact on older faculty. We don't know. I mean, that's the thing that we're waiting to find out. I mean, it's, you know, I've had all kinds of interactions with what you would consider quote unquote older faculty in my over the past 2 weeks as we've moved through this space. And some of it, they've been really pleasantly surprised and excited about it. Others have been angry and frustrated by it. Others have gone back and forth between the two. You know, I think that it's shown faculty of all stripes possibilities. I think they're discovering resources on campus that they never knew existed before, which is great for my job security, personally. But also, like, and I said this on Twitter, I think this is, you're right, John, it's a moment, right? And we have a moment, and we have an opportunity, and we have an opening in unfortunate circumstances to not move the needle a little bit. Like you said, have people be a little bit more dynamic, a little more flexible, a little bit more reflective even. They just ask the question, why have I been doing it this way? And even if they say, you know what, I'm going to keep doing it, at least they had that moment where they thought about it. There's a moment that we might not have had otherwise, right? And so I think that that's a really invaluable thing that we've all sort of had to literally slam on the brakes and take a step back and then like dive headfirst into this and just be like, okay, what are we doing and why are we doing it this way? And what does it mean? And I think that's been the question in all the media that's been out there. And I'm doing a podcast tomorrow, and that's the question is, what does this mean for the future of higher education? And I'm like, I have no idea. Like, we don't know. We don't know. Wait and see, man. Like, it'll mean different things in different contexts. It's going to mean something very different to us at Georgetown than it will at UMW, than it will at Morehead State, than it will at community colleges. You know, you know, some changes will be accelerated, other changes will be slowed down. Like, people are saying this is the opportunity that everyone's been waiting for, that everything's going to go online and just ramp up online classes. And I'm like, I don't think that's really true, but maybe
it's
some places.
Horribly expensive.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
no, they're seeing how expensive it is at this point, right? That this is a cost saving. It's not.
It's not a cost saving, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of a moment, I mean, what we haven't talked about in this group yet explicitly, which we will, is advocacy.
Yeah.
Which is, this is our, you know, because all of us have different experiences and trainings and opportunities at our teaching centers. And I have, at UMW, we have a great teaching center, and I'm very well trained and the like. But, you know, and part of the reason why I made this page was there are a lot of people I know who I'm friends with on all social media who aren't, who have like, I have no idea to do this, right? Which is why I made the page. So I think it's a chance for assessing how people made sense of the situation themselves at their universities, right? And know what it could have been that they learned from other people. To also ask, why don't we have these resources? Why don't we have teaching centers like this? Why don't we have fellowship programs, right? Why don't we have, you know, hybrid technology fellows? Why don't we have these kind of things, right? And I think that that's where this speaks towards our faculty governance, right? In which, you know, I want to empower people to have data for experiences, and this group can be surveyed and the like in terms of what they've been doing and how they've been doing things, to go back to the universities and promote change in a way that makes sense, right, for the university. Not everyone has to change, right? But, you know, if anything, we've kind of hacked training.
Yeah.
If you think about it for a second, you know, and I say this, and I don't know if it's to what degree it's true, how many millions of dollars we saved in a week, right? In terms of interacting with one another online and not having certain programs or licensures or different groups coming in and the like, and doing stuff for us, but also we saved in a chance where we had the time to do these things, right? And the purposes for we wanted to do for, right? So like some organizations, universities have like fellowship programs, and you're going to fix one class and it's a very slow process. That's a bad model. But you know, you get the call and you're on a P&T committee and 3 other committees, and you're going in for tenure, and you're like, I don't know what class I'm gonna put on for that to change for next year, right? I don't know, you know, to what degree we're gonna have this kind of pushback. But the other thing, you know, in terms of reaction, I really think it's you know, an instance by which we see inequality of how we have opportunities for instruction. We also see inequality in what we expect our students have access to, right? And so one of the big things that started in the beginning feeds, which is how do we know they can get online if we're going online? And the differences between online education, distance education, or remote education, right? Because some students are only going to be able to do this by email. They can get on Zoom, right? But my students, and one thing I did is I did an audit of, can you get online at home or wherever you are safely, right? And then I made the homework was practicing. I was sitting here doing emails, and all like, you know, 75 literally got on Zoom and said hi and waved to me and showed me they could do chat, and then logged off, and I knew they couldn't. And for those who couldn't, you know, it was they called in, they're able to get in chat, they're able to get in the group, right? And then we're gonna do this, because I don't do Zoom every time now, I'm gonna do it partially. Is they're also able to get into the experience as well, right? And so to what degree we can assume that all our students have access to do in the mode that your university has, because they don't have access to Canvas at home. They don't have access beyond maybe a phone at home. And now, in which we have these assumptions, they should not be going to a public library, right? You know, we're in a state where, you know, if you go to Starbucks where I live, you know, or, you know, in like a Target, you know, they removed all the chairs and seats and everything so no one can sit down. Right? And so they need to figure out how to do this at home. And if their phone is the only thing they have, it is what it is. And we have to work with them there. Yeah. And we have to be flexible and lenient, understanding, empathetic, because we're in this situation. But we can't just assume all of our students have the same access outside, because they don't. They just don't.
Yeah, and I think that has really, to Frederick's point, and you kind of spoke to that, it really has forced institutions, but I truly believe individuals within the institutions as well, who have been sort of like, oh, they're on campus, it's fine. And they don't really think like, well, there's the library they can go to, and there's Starbucks that they can go to. And there's, you know, I don't know why, you know, there shouldn't be any reason why students can't get online. And all of a sudden, it has come up very hard against the reality that they have denied that there is unequal access, and these are not excuses, these are legitimate reasons, and we have not addressed them. And you know, hopefully it's also broader social policy change, right? Like, can we finally get broadband into rural areas, right? Can we as a society say like, we tried this and it didn't work because, you know, there are still parts of the country that don't have this, right? And maybe not at the federal level, but certainly at the state level, right? You know, is being able to vote for our politicians, vote for policies, push for policies that do this. So, I mean, I don't want to get too political about it, but it's not just our institutions that we work in, but the institutions that we live in and vote for, that we can, you know, maybe finally realize some of these inequalities that we've been blind to or willfully blind to, and start thinking about, well, what are we going to do about them?
Sure. Yeah, and I agree with Jean. I mean, everything's political.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, it is. But, you know, at a school, my school this year very wisely created our first food bank for students and resource center, right? Which are growing rapidly amongst students, as is home insecurity and food insecurity. So if we know that students may not be fed now because they're not on campus, why would they have access to the internet? Yeah. Right. And so, and I understand that, but if they do, you know, they just have access on their phone. And to what degree do they have the same potential capacity to do assignments on their phone that someone else has on a brand new, you know, MacBook Pro, right? In terms of technology.
And not only that, how are they going to get their assignments done when they're hungry?
Sure.
You know, like I could have a computer and internet, but I got no food in my stomach. Let me tell you, I'm not getting that work done. Not well. You know, so these are, I mean, these are the things that get surfaced, and, you know, I mean, it's not something that being able to do good work, collaborative work online is going to solve, but at least it creates, and that's why I think they're so important. If I could like sort of circle it back around difficultly, why I think these opportunities are so important, because they do allow students the space to stay connected to one another, even if it is through the schoolwork, right? And they can feel connected, and they feel like, you know, what they're doing matters to themselves and to other people, and just to keep that connection and keep those lines open, because, you know, a lot of students are being cut off literally from their support network, from their sense of safety and security. And so what are the ways within the structures of our classes that we can help maintain some of them, right? And even maybe strengthen them. So, you know, it's small things like that, you know, we can both meet our learning outcomes and be empathetic and create space and opportunities for the students to connect with one another, and with, you know, and with you, the instructor.
Yeah, I want to agree with Frederick before we go in terms of federal work study and the like, and our international students. And, you know, I'm trying to make sense of, my students are just realizing they won't have summer jobs. If they're hourly wage, to the degree that when I was out yesterday briefly and there was a job posting, I literally posted it to all my students who live in my region, in terms of like, there are hourly jobs, because we are in a space where our hotels are closing, our casinos are closing, and our restaurants are closing. And we're not in a like quarantine kind of place yet. We're not like Seattle yet, but you can start to see everything changing quickly. So, and I mean, I'm sure Lee sees that too.
Yeah. So, well, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're all exhausted and have been working so hard. I appreciate all of the comments that you've made, all of the suggestions, all of the questions, the conversation that has come through. This is why I think it's important that groups and spaces like this exist, again, not just for our students, but for ourselves, so that we can feel connected and less alone. So thank you, John, for setting up the group. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to do the inaugural one and show all the ways that it can go wrong.
I love irony.
I know, right? Oh yeah, it's my job. They pay me big bucks literally to do this, and I can't get it right for free. So with that, I wish you all good night. If you are in the Eastern time zone, if you're in an earlier time zone, then have a nice dinner. And you know, stay safe, and stay healthy, and, you know, listen to your students.
Absolutely. See you all on the Facebook page. Bye-bye.
Yep. Thanks so much, everyone.